Tycoon husband celebrates birthday with Mistress. Unaware his pregnant wife watches in tears, it's a quiet morning in their sprawling mansion just outside New York City. The sunlight filters through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden streaks across the marble floors. But despite the beauty surrounding them, there's an unmistakable heaviness in the air. Sarah sits at the kitchen island, her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, staring blankly at the steam rising from it. Her belly, now 6 months swollen with new life, rests heavily on her lap as she shifts uncomfortably. James strides into the room, his phone glued to his ear. He's dressed impeccably, as always. Crisp white shirt, tailored slacks, polished shoes. His voice is calm but clipped, barking orders to someone on the other end of the line. "I don't care what it takes. Just get it done," he says firmly before hanging up. Without even glancing at Sarah, he grabs a protein bar from the counter and starts heading toward the door. "James," Sarah calls out softly, her voice trembling slightly. She hesitates, unsure if she should say more. When he pauses but doesn't turn around, she continues, "Do you think we could talk tonight? Just us?" He exhales sharply, running a hand over his face. "Sarah, I've got back-to-back meetings all day, and then dinner with clients. You know how this works. But it's been weeks since we've really talked," she presses, her voice breaking ever so slightly. "We used to share everything. Now it feels like..." She trails off, unable to finish the sentence. "Like what?" he snaps, finally turning to look at her. There's irritation in his tone, but also something else. Guilt, maybe? Regret? It's hard to tell behind the mask of impatience he wears so well. "Look, Sarah, I'm doing this for us, for our future. Do you have any idea how much pressure I'm under?" "For us?" she whispers, tears welling up in her eyes. "Or for you, James? Because sometimes it feels like you're not even here anymore." She places a protective hand on her belly, as though shielding their unborn child from the tension crackling between them. He looks at her for a long moment, his jaw tightening. Then, without another word, he walks out the door, leaving her alone with the echo of his absence. As the sound of his car engine fades into the distance, Sarah lowers her head onto her arms, letting the tears fall freely. She had dreamed of this life once. The big house, the successful husband, the family they'd build together. But somewhere along the way, the dream turned sour. And now, sitting here in silence, she wonders if the man she fell in love with still exists, or if he's been swallowed whole by ambition and secrets. Tease a text from James. "Running late. Don't wait up." She stares at the screen, her heart sinking further with each word. Late again. Always late. Or worse, always somewhere else. Across town, James is seated at a sleek rooftop restaurant, surrounded by twinkling city lights and soft jazz music. Across from him sits Elena, his assistant turned mistress. She laughs lightly at something he says, her fingers brushing against the stem of her wine glass. The chemistry between them is palpable, though neither acknowledges it outright. "You didn't have to do all this for my birthday," James says, gesturing toward the elegant setup, the candlelit table, the bottle of vintage champagne chilling in its silver bucket. His tone is casual, but there's a flicker of pride in his eyes. This is his world, after all, a place where money buys admiration and control. "It's not every day your boss turns 40, Elena replies, her voice smooth and teasing. She leans forward slightly, her gaze locking onto his. "Besides, I figured you deserved something special." James smirks, raising his glass. "To special occasions, then." They clink glasses, and for a moment, he forgets about Sarah, the baby, the life he left behind hours ago. In this space, he feels untethered, free from responsibility, free from guilt, or so he tells himself. Back home, Sarah can't shake the feeling that something isn't right. She picks up her phone again, scrolling through James's social media profiles. Nothing suspicious, of course. He's too careful for that. But when she checks his calendar app, which she forgot to log out of on their shared iPad, her stomach twists into knots. There it is, a reservation under his name at one of the most exclusive restaurants in Manhattan. For two. Her hands tremble as she grabs her coat and keys. I need to see for myself, she thinks, desperation clawing at her chest. The drive into the city feels endless, every red light stretching longer than the last. When she finally arrives at the restaurant, she parks across the street, her breath fogging up the car window as she peers inside. Through the glass walls of the restaurant, she sees them. James laughing, Elena leaning in close, their body language speaking louder than words ever could. Sarah's vision blurs with tears, and she presses a hand to her mouth to stifle a sob. Her mind races with questions. How long has this been going on? Does he even care about us anymore? What kind of father will he be if he can't even stay faithful now? She watches as Elena reaches out, her hand briefly touching James's wrist. He doesn't pull away. Instead, he smiles. A genuine, warm smile that Sarah hasn't seen directed at her in months. That single gesture breaks her. She slumps back in her seat, clutching her abdomen protectively, as if shielding her unborn child from the pain radiating through her own heart. I trusted you, she whispers to herself, her voice barely audible above the hum of the city outside. I gave you everything. The weight of betrayal settles over her like a suffocating blanket. She knows she should leave, go back home, confront him later, but she can't tear her eyes away. Each laugh, each glance between them feels like another nail in the coffin of their marriage. And yet, beneath the anger and sadness, there's a flicker of determination. This isn't over, she thinks, wiping her tears with trembling fingers. Not yet. As she starts the car and pulls away from the curb, the camera lingers on the restaurant window one final time. Inside, James raises his glass once more, oblivious to the storm brewing just beyond the glass. And within his own life, Sarah's mind races with fragmented thoughts, each one more painful than the last. By the time she pulls into the driveway, her face is streaked with mascara, and her chest feels like it's being crushed under the weight of everything she's just witnessed. She steps out of the car, the cold night air biting at her skin, but she barely notices. All she can feel is the ache in her heart and the growing fear for the future of her unborn child. Inside the house, she paces the living room, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if trying to hold herself together. The clock ticks loudly on the wall, each second stretching into an eternity. Finally, she hears the faint sound of James's car pulling into the driveway. Her breath catches in her throat. She doesn't know what to say, or if she even has the strength to confront him. But she knows this moment cannot be ignored. The front door opens and James walks in, his tie loosened, his jacket slung over one arm. He looks up, startled to see Sarah standing there, her tear-streaked face illuminated by the soft glow of the living room lamp. For a moment, he freezes, confusion flickering across his features. Then his expression hardens. "Sarah, what are you doing up?" he asks, his voice tinged with irritation, as though her presence is an inconvenience. She takes a shaky step forward, her fists clenched at her sides. "Don't," she says, her voice trembling but firm. "Don't pretend like nothing happened." James frowns, setting his keys down on the table. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," she snaps, her voice breaking. Tears spill down her cheeks as she stares at him, her chest heaving with emotion. "I saw you, James, at the restaurant with her." His face goes pale, and for a split second he looks like a man caught in headlights. But then he recovers, his jaw tightening as he crosses his arms defensively. "You followed me? Are you serious right now?" "Of course I followed you," she cries, throwing her hands up in frustration. "How could I not? You lied to me, James. You made plans for your birthday. Our anniversary next month was supposed to be special. And instead, you were out with some woman. She's just a colleague," he insists, his voice rising. "It's not what it looks like, okay? You're blowing this way out of proportion. Blowing it out of proportion? Sarah repeats, incredulous. She laughs bitterly, shaking her head. So, laughing with her, touching her hand, that's just colleagues having dinner? Do you think I'm stupid? James runs a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Look, I didn't mean for you to find out like this. But yes, Elena and I have been spending time together. That doesn't mean anything, Sarah. You're my wife. This baby, you're my family. Then why does it feel like you've already left us? She whispers, her voice cracking under the weight of her pain. She wraps her arms around herself again, hugging her belly protectively. Do you even care about us anymore? About me? About this baby? Her words hang in the air, heavy and unanswerable. James stares at her, his expression conflicted. For a brief moment, guilt flashes in his eyes, but it's quickly masked by defensiveness. You're being dramatic, he mutters, turning away from her. I work hard every single day to give you the life you wanted. And yet, nothing I do is ever enough. That's not true, she shouts, stepping closer to him. I never asked for all this, the big house, the fancy cars. I just wanted you. I wanted the man who used to look at me the way you looked at her tonight. But that man, he's gone. Her voice breaks on the last word, and she turns away, unable to look at him any longer. The silence that follows is deafening, broken only by the sound of Sarah's muffled sobs. James stands there, frozen, his fists clenched at his sides. He wants to say something, anything, to fix this, but the words won't come. Instead, he watches as Sarah grabs her coat and heads for the door. Where are you going? He demands, panic creeping into his voice. Away from here, she replies without looking back. I need space to think, to figure out what I'm going to do next. Sarah, wait, he starts, taking a step toward her. But she's already out the door, slamming it shut behind her. He stands there for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway, the reality of what's happening sinking in. For the first time, he realizes just how much he might lose, and how little time he has left to make things right. Sarah wakes up in her childhood bedroom, the familiar creak of the floorboards beneath her feet grounding her in a place she once called home. Her mother's quilt is draped over her, though she doesn't remember pulling it up last night. The room smells faintly of lavender, a scent that used to comfort her. But today, it feels suffocating, like a reminder of simpler times she can no longer return to. Her phone buzzes on the nightstand, and she glances at it hesitantly. 5 missed calls from James. 2 voicemails. A text, "We need to talk. Please call me." She stares at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone face down, unable to bring herself to listen or respond. Instead, she sits on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the rain-soaked trees swaying gently in the wind. Her mind races with conflicting thoughts. Should she fight for her marriage? Is James even worth fighting for? And what about the baby? How will this affect their child? Every question feels heavier than the last, pressing down on her chest until it's hard to breathe. A soft knock on the door pulls her from her spiraling thoughts. Sarah? Her mother's voice calls softly. Can I come in? Sarah wipes at her eyes quickly, forcing a small smile as she nods. Yeah, Mom. Come in. Her mother steps inside, her expression filled with concern. She sits beside Sarah on the bed, placing a gentle hand on her knee. Honey, do you want to talk about it? For a moment, Sarah hesitates, but then the dam breaks. Tears spill down her cheeks as she begins to pour out everything. The arguments, the distance between her and James, the restaurant, Elena. Her words tumble out in a rush, disjointed and raw, but her mother listens patiently, nodding occasionally without interrupting. When Sarah finally pauses to catch her breath, her mother sighs softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Oh, sweetheart, she says, her voice thick with emotion. I know how much you've given to this marriage, but you have to ask yourself, what kind of life are you building for yourself and for your baby if you stay with someone who doesn't seem willing to meet you halfway? But what if I'm overreacting? Sarah whispers, her voice trembling. What if I leave? And I regret it later. He said he loves me, that we're his family. And yet, he chose to spend his birthday with another woman. Her mother points out gently, love isn't just about words, Sarah. It's about actions. You deserve someone who shows up for you. Not just when it's convenient, but every single day. Sarah nods slowly, her chest tightening as the truth of her mother's words sinks in. Still, the uncertainty lingers. But what if I fail? What if I can't raise this baby alone? What if I lose everything? You won't be alone, her mother assures her, squeezing her hand. You'll always have me, your father, your siblings. We'll help you through this no matter what you decide. But honey, you can't let fear keep you trapped in a situation that's making you unhappy. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful beginnings. As her mother speaks, Sarah feels a flicker of resolve ignite within her. For the first time since discovering James's betrayal, she allows herself to consider the possibility of walking away, not because she wants to hurt him, but because she owes it to herself and her baby to find peace. Later that afternoon, Sarah sits at the kitchen table, pen in hand, staring at a blank sheet of paper. She's trying to write a letter to James, to explain her feelings and outline her decision. But every time she starts, the words feel wrong. How do you put something so complicated into sentences? Finally, after several crumpled drafts, she begins, Dear James, I don't know where to start. My heart is broken, and my mind is spinning with questions I don't have answers to. Last night was one of the hardest nights of my life. Not just because of what I saw, but because of what it made me realize about us. Or rather, about what we've become. I love you. I loved the man you were. The man who promised me forever, who held my hand through every up and down. But somewhere along the way, we lost each other. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe it's yours. Or maybe it's just life. Either way, I can't keep living like this, waiting for things to change while standing still. I need time, space, to figure out who I am without you, and whether there's any part of us left worth saving. Please respect that. If you truly care about me, about our baby, you'll give me the space I need to heal. Yours, Sarah. She reads the letter over, tears blurring her vision. It's not perfect, but it's honest. Folding it carefully, she places it in an envelope and seals it shut. Tomorrow she'll send it to him. For now, she allows herself a moment of quiet, looking out the window at the storm clouds beginning to part, revealing patches of sunlight breaking through. The house feels eerily empty without her. Her laughter no longer echoing through the halls, her faint humming absent from the kitchen. Even the baby items they'd started to accumulate seem out of place now, reminders of the family he might lose if he doesn't act quickly. One evening, as he sits alone in the dimly lit study, nursing a glass of whiskey, his phone buzzes on the desk. He glances at it reluctantly. It's Elena. He hesitates before answering, guilt gnawing at him more fiercely than ever before. When he finally picks up, his voice is strained. Hey, James, Elena says softly, her tone tinged with concern. I heard about Sarah leaving. Are you okay? He exhales sharply, running a hand over his face. Do I sound okay? My wife walked out on me because of you, or rather, because of what we've been doing. And honestly, I don't even know how to fix this. There's a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, quietly, Elena replies, Maybe it's not your marriage that needs fixing, James. Maybe it's you. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He opens his mouth to argue, to deflect, but nothing comes out. Instead, he stares into the amber liquid swirling in his glass, the weight of her statements settling over him. What are you saying? He asks finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm saying that I see the way you look at her when you think no one's watching. Elena continues, her voice steady but laced with sadness. You love her, James. You always have. But somewhere along the way, you stopped fighting for her. You let work and stress and, well, me get in the way. And now you're paying the price. James leans back in his chair, closing his eyes as her words sink in. She's right. He knows she's right, but hearing it aloud makes it impossible to ignore. For months, he's justified his actions. telling himself that Sarah wouldn't understand, that Elena made him feel alive again. But deep down, he knows the truth. He betrayed the woman who has stood by him through everything. "I messed up," he admits, his voice breaking slightly. "I messed up so badly, and now I don't even know where to start." "You start by being honest with her and with yourself," Elena says firmly. "If you truly want to save your marriage, you'll have to fight harder than you ever have before. No excuses, no distractions, just you and her." They hang up shortly after, leaving James alone with his thoughts once again. He pours another glass of whiskey, though he barely touches it. His mind races with memories of Sarah, the way she used to smile at him, the way she'd hold his hand during late-night conversations, the way her eyes lit up when she told him she was pregnant. All those moments feel impossibly distant now, like fragments of a dream slipping through his fingers. The next morning, James wakes up determined to make things right. He drives to Sarah's parents' house, rehearsing what he'll say in his head over and over again. When he arrives, he knocks nervously on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. Her father answers, his expression unreadable. "Is Sarah here?" James asks, his voice trembling slightly. "She's in the garden," her father replies curtly, stepping aside to let him in. It's clear he's not happy to see James, but he doesn't stop him either. James finds Sarah sitting on a bench beneath a sprawling oak tree, her hands resting gently on her belly. She looks up as he approaches, surprise flickering across her face. "What are you doing here?" she asks, her voice guarded. "I came to apologize," James says, taking a tentative step closer. "Not just for what happened at the restaurant, for everything. For being absent, for putting my job ahead of us, for letting you down time and time again. I was selfish, Sarah. And I'm sorry." Tears well up in her eyes, but she doesn't speak. Instead, she watches him carefully, searching for sincerity in his expression. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he continues, his own voice thick with emotion. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn it. Therapy, counseling, cutting ties with Elena, I'll do it all. Because the thought of losing you, of losing our family, it's unbearable." Sarah looks away, her gaze dropping to her hands. After a long silence, she speaks, her voice barely audible. "It's not just about forgiving you, James. It's about trusting you again. And right now, I don't know if I can." Her words sting, but he knows they're deserved. Nodding slowly, he takes a step back, giving her space. "I understand," he says softly, "and I'll respect whatever decision you make. But please, just give me a chance to prove that I'm still the man you fell in love with." With that, he turns and walks away, leaving Sarah sitting beneath the tree, her emotions swirling like storm clouds. As she watches him go, she feels a flicker of hope, a fragile, tentative spark, but also the lingering fear that some wounds may never fully heal. She spends her days helping her mother around the house, going for quiet walks in the crisp autumn air, and trying to focus on anything but James. Yet, no matter how hard she tries to distract herself, his words linger in her mind like an unanswered question. "Please, just give me a chance." One afternoon, while sipping tea at a cozy cafe downtown, Sarah is startled when a familiar voice calls out her name. She looks up to see Elena standing there, clutching a leather tote bag and looking as surprised as Sarah feels. For a moment, neither woman speaks. They simply stare at each other, the weight of unspoken tension hanging thick between them. "Sarah," Elena says finally, breaking the silence. I didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same," Sarah replies coolly, though her heart begins to race. She considers leaving, but something holds her back. A strange curiosity, perhaps, or the faint hope that this encounter might bring clarity. Elena hesitates before pulling out the chair across from Sarah and sitting down without waiting for an invitation. "Look, I know this is awkward," she begins, her tone cautious, "but I wanted to talk to you if you're willing." Sarah raises an eyebrow, her grip tightening slightly on her teacup. "Talk to me? About what?" "About James," Elena admits, her cheeks flushing with guilt. "And about everything." For a long moment, Sarah doesn't respond. She studies Elena's face, searching for any trace of mockery or manipulation. But all she sees is vulnerability, a raw honesty that disarms her defenses just enough to listen. "What do you want to say?" Sarah asks finally, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Elena takes a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I'm not proud of what happened between me and James. It wasn't fair to you or to him for that matter. At first, I convinced myself it was harmless, that he needed someone who understood his pressures, his world. But the truth is, I used him. And now, seeing how much pain it's caused you too, I realize how selfish I've been." Sarah blinks, caught off guard by the sincerity in Elena's voice. Part of her wants to lash out, to unleash the anger and hurt she's been carrying for weeks. But another part, the part that spent countless nights wondering why this happened, urges her to keep listening. "So what are you saying?" Sarah asks, her tone softer now. "That you regret it?" "Yes," Elena says firmly, meeting Sarah's gaze. "I do. And I also think you deserve better than the way he's treated you. You're strong, Sarah. Stronger than I'll ever be. If anyone can get through this, it's you." The words hit Sarah like a wave, washing over her in a mix of relief and sadness. She hadn't realized until now how much she craved validation. Not just from James, but from someone else who understood the complexity of the situation. Still, doubts linger in her mind. "And what about James?" Sarah asks quietly. "Do you really believe he can change? Or are you just trying to ease your own guilt?" Elena sighs, leaning back in her chair. "Honestly, I don't know if he can change. That's not my place to decide. But I do know one thing. He loves you. Maybe not in the way you deserve right now, but he does love you. And if he's serious about fixing things, then he'll have to fight for you. Not just once, but every single day." Her words strike a chord deep within Sarah, stirring memories of the man she fell in love with years ago. The man who promised to stand by her side through thick and thin. The man who, despite his flaws, still had the capacity to love deeply. As the conversation winds down, Elena stands to leave, offering Sarah a small, tentative smile. "Take care of yourself, okay? And your baby. No matter what happens, you've got this." Sarah nods, watching as Elena walks away, her figure disappearing into the crowd outside the cafe. Alone again, she sits in silence, replaying their conversation in her mind. For the first time since discovering James's betrayal, she allows herself to entertain the possibility of forgiveness. Not because she owes it to him, but because she owes it to herself to consider whether their love story still has a chance to be rewritten. One particularly grueling morning, James sits in his office, staring blankly at the stack of papers in front of him. His phone buzzes incessantly on the desk. Emails, texts, missed calls, but he ignores them all. He's too consumed by the weight of his failures. Sarah's absence, the growing distance between him and his unborn child, and now, the professional fallout that threatens to dismantle everything he's worked for. A sharp knock on the door pulls him from his thoughts. "Come in," he mutters, his voice devoid of energy. His assistant, a young man named Ryan, steps inside, clutching a folder. "Mr. Carter, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we've got a problem." James sighs heavily, rubbing his temples. "What now?" Ryan hesitates, clearly uncomfortable. "It's about the merger deal. One of our key investors pulled out this morning. They cited concerns about, well, your personal life affecting the company's image." James feels the blood drain from his face. "What did you say to them?" "Nothing," Ryan insists quickly. "But the rumors, they're everywhere, sir. People are talking. If we don't address this soon, more investors might follow suit." For a moment, James says nothing. He stares at the floor, his mind racing with the implications. This isn't just about money or business anymore. It's about legacy, about proving to the world and to himself that he's still capable of success. But how can he focus on saving his career when his personal life is in shambles? "Leave it with me," he says finally, his voice hollow. "I'll handle it." As Ryan exits the room, James slumps back in his chair, his head in his hands. The walls of his pristine office suddenly feel suffocating, closing in on him like the judgmental stares he's been avoiding for weeks. He reaches for his phone, scrolling through old photos of Sarah, her smiling at their wedding, her laughing during a weekend getaway, her glowing with happiness when she told him she was pregnant. Each image stabs at his heart, reminding him of what he's lost. That evening, after another long day of damage control, James returns home to an empty house. The silence is deafening, broken only by the sound of his footsteps echoing through the halls. He pours himself a drink and sits on the couch, staring at the fireplace where they used to cuddle during cold winter nights. His phone buzzes again, and this time he answers without looking at the screen. "Hello, James?" Sarah's voice, soft and hesitant. His breath catches in his throat. "Sarah," he says, sitting up straighter. "How are you? Is everything okay?" "I'm fine," she replies, though her tone suggests otherwise. I needed to talk to you." "Of course," he says quickly, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. "What is it?" There's a pause, and when she speaks again, her words are measured but heavy with emotion. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what you said the last time you came to see me, about wanting to change." James grips the phone tightly, his pulse quickening. And I believe you mean it," she continues. "But words aren't enough, James. Actions matter. And right now, I need to know if you're ready to put in the work. Not just for me, but for our baby. For our family." Her question hangs in the air, piercing through the fog of self-pity and regret that has clouded his mind for weeks. He swallows hard, his voice trembling as he responds. "I am ready, Sarah. I swear to you I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, being present, cutting ties with Elena. I'll do it all. Just tell me what you need from me." Another pause, longer this time. Then softly, she says, "I need time, James. Time to heal. Time to trust you again. Can you give me that?" "Yes," he whispers, tears welling up in his eyes. "Whatever you need. As much time as you need." When they hang up, James sits in silence, the weight of her words settling over him like a bittersweet promise. For the first time in months, he feels a flicker of hope, a fragile, tentative light in the darkness. But he knows better than to cling to it too tightly. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. And redemption, if it comes at all, will require sacrifices he's only beginning to understand. But no matter how many steps forward he takes, doubt lingers in the back of his mind. Is it too late? Has she already moved on? One chilly November afternoon, James parks his car outside Sarah's parents' house. His hands grip the steering wheel tightly as he stares at the familiar front door, his heart pounding in his chest. He hasn't seen her since their phone call weeks ago, and the thought of facing her in person fills him with both hope and dread. Taking a deep breath, he steps out of the car and walks to the door. Before he can knock, it swings open, revealing Sarah's father. The older man's expression is stern, his arms crossed over his chest. "James," he says curtly, "what are you doing here?" "I'm here to see Sarah," James replies, his voice steady despite the nerves coursing through him. "Please, sir, I just want to talk to her." Sarah's father studies him for a long moment, his gaze piercing. Finally, he sighs and steps aside. "She's in the garden. But let me make one thing clear. If you hurt her again, there won't be a second chance." James nods solemnly, his throat tight with emotion. "I understand, and I promise you, I'll spend the rest of my life making things right." He finds Sarah sitting on a bench beneath the same sprawling oak tree where they last spoke. She looks up as he approaches, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. For a moment, neither of them speaks. They simply stare at each other, the weight of everything unsaid hanging heavy in the air. "Hey," James says softly, taking a tentative step closer. "Can we talk?" Sarah hesitates, then nods. "Okay." He sits down beside her, careful to leave space between them. The silence stretches for what feels like an eternity before he finally breaks it. "How have you been?" he asks, his voice tinged with uncertainty. I've been Okay, she replies, her tone guarded but not unkind. The baby's healthy. That's the most important thing. James nods, relief washing over him at the mention of their child. That's good. Really good. He pauses, gathering his thoughts. Sarah, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. Not after everything I've done. But I need you to know that I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying to be better. For you, for our baby, for us. Her eyes soften slightly, though her expression remains cautious. It's not just about trying, James. It's about consistency. About showing me, not telling me, that you're willing to change. I get that, he says quickly, leaning forward earnestly. And I will. I've started seeing a therapist, going to those parenting classes you mentioned. I even quit the board position at Carter Enterprises. I realized I was letting my ego define me instead of focusing on what truly matters. Sarah blinks, taken aback by his admission. You quit the board? Why would you do that? Because I needed to prove to you and to myself that I'm serious about this. He explains, his voice thick with emotion. I don't want to be the man who prioritizes power over family anymore. I want to be the man you fell in love with. The man our baby deserves. Tears well up in Sarah's eyes, and she looks away, struggling to maintain her composure. It's not going to be easy, James. Trust isn't something you can just fix overnight. There will be days when I doubt you, when I wonder if you'll slip back into old habits. I know, he says, reaching out hesitantly to take her hand. When she doesn't pull away, he continues, his voice breaking slightly. And I'll respect that. I'll respect whatever boundaries you need to set. Just, please, give me a chance to show you that I mean it. That I'm not the same man who walked out on you that night. Sarah looks at him, her heart torn between anger and longing. She wants to believe him, wants to hold on to the hope that their love can survive the storm. But fear whispers in the back of her mind, warning her not to trust too easily. Finally, she speaks, her voice barely above a whisper. If I agree to give us another chance, it has to be different this time. No excuses, no distractions. Just you and me, and our baby. James nods fervently, tears streaming down his face. Anything, whatever you need, I'll do it. For the first time in months, Sarah allows herself to feel a flicker of hope. A fragile, tentative spark that maybe, just maybe, they can find their way back to each other. But as she looks into James's tear-filled eyes, she knows the road ahead will be long and difficult. Forgiveness is only the first step. Rebuilding trust will take time, patience, and unwavering effort from both of them. Months pass, and the fragile threads of James and Sarah's relationship begin to weave themselves back together. Slowly, painstakingly, like stitching up a torn tapestry. They move into a smaller home downtown, trading the sprawling mansion for something cozier, more intimate. It's a symbolic gesture, a fresh start, away from the ghosts of their past mistakes. One evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, casting warm hues across the living room, Sarah sits on the couch with her feet propped up, flipping through a parenting magazine. Her belly is now round and heavy with their son, due in just a few weeks. James enters the room, balancing 2 mugs of chamomile tea. He sets one down gently on the coffee table in front of her. Here, he says softly, sitting beside her. I thought you might need this after today's doctor's appointment. Sarah smiles faintly, taking the mug in both hands. Thanks. I did feel a little overwhelmed earlier. She pauses, glancing at him sideways. But it's not just the baby stress, you know? Sometimes I still wonder if we're doing the right thing. James exhales slowly, his shoulders sagging under the weight of her words. You mean us? She nods, sipping her tea before setting it aside. It's not that I don't believe you've changed, James. You have. I see it every day, the way you help around the house, how patient you are during my mood swings, the fact that you actually listened when I said I needed space to process everything. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. And some nights, I lie awake wondering if I'll ever fully trust you again. Her honesty cuts deep, but James doesn't shy away from it. Instead, he leans forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his voice trembling with emotion. I understand why you'd feel that way. Honestly, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared too. Scared that no matter what I do, I'll never make up for the pain I caused you. But Sarah... He turns to face her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm not giving up. Not on you, not on us, not on our family. Even if it takes years for you to trust me completely, I'll wait, because you're worth it. The sincerity in his voice tugs at Sarah's heartstrings, and she looks down, blinking back tears of her own. It's hard, James. Some days I want to believe we can go back to the way things were, to the love we had before all this happened. Other days, I wonder if that love even exists anymore. It does, he insists, reaching out to take her hand. When she doesn't pull away, he continues, his grip tightening slightly. It's different now, sure. We're different, but the foundation is still there. It's just stronger because we've been through hell and come out the other side. Together. For a long moment, neither of them speaks. The only sound is the soft hum of the ceiling fan above them and the distant chirping of crickets outside. Finally, Sarah squeezes his hand lightly, her lips curving into a small, tentative smile. Okay, she whispers. Let's keep going. One step at a time. Relief floods James's face, and he leans over to kiss her forehead gently. Thank you, Sarah, for believing in me, in us. Later that night, as they prepare for bed, Sarah receives a text from Elena. At first, she hesitates to open it, unsure if she's ready to hear from the woman who once threatened to destroy her marriage. But curiosity gets the better of her, and she taps the screen. Hey, Sarah, I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to check in and let you know I've accepted a job offer in Chicago. A fresh start, you know? Anyway, thank you for being so gracious when we talked. You inspired me to take control of my own life and maybe figure out who I really am without relying on anyone else. Wishing you and your family all the best. Sarah stares at the message for a long time, her chest swelling with unexpected gratitude. Despite everything, Elena's words remind her of the importance of growth. Not just within relationships, but within oneself. She shows the text to James, who reads it silently before looking up at her. She sounds happy, he says cautiously, unsure how Sarah will react. She does, Sarah replies, her voice thoughtful. And honestly, I'm glad. Maybe she needed this as much as we did. A chance to start over. As they climb into bed together, the distance between them feels smaller than it has in months. There's still work to be done, wounds to heal, and fears to overcome. But for the first time in a long time, they feel hopeful. Hopeful that their love, though battered and bruised, can endure the storms ahead. This scene delves into the complexities of rebuilding trust, capturing the emotional highs and lows of James and Sarah's journey toward reconciliation. Through heartfelt dialogue and introspection, the narrative underscores the importance of patience, communication, and mutual effort in healing fractured relationships. As both characters reflect on their growth, the audience is left rooting for their future, even as lingering doubts remind them that true redemption requires time and unwavering commitment. The months blur into weeks, and then days, as Sarah's due date approaches. The house is filled with a quiet kind of anticipation, a mix of excitement and nervous energy that lingers in every corner. James has taken parental leave from work, determined to be present for every moment leading up to the birth of their son. He spends his days helping Sarah prepare, setting up the nursery, attending birthing classes, and cooking meals she can barely keep down. One crisp December morning, the first snowfall blankets the city in white. Sarah wakes up with a jolt, clutching her belly as a sharp contraction ripples through her body. She looks over at James, who's sleeping soundly beside her, his face relaxed in a way it hasn't been in years. Gently, she nudges him awake. James, she whispers urgently. It's time. His eyes snap open, and for a split second he freezes, then panic gives way to action. Okay, he mutters, scrambling out of bed. Hospital bag? Check. Phone? Got it. Let me grab the keys. As they drive to the hospital, the streets eerily quiet under the falling snow, Sarah grips James's hand tightly, her breath shallow but steady. Each contraction feels like a wave pulling her closer to shore, and though fear flickers in her chest, there's also an undeniable sense of peace. For the first time in what feels like forever, she feels ready for motherhood, for partnership, for whatever comes next. Hours later, after a long and grueling labor, the sound of a baby's cry fills the delivery room. Tears stream down Sarah's face as the nurse places their newborn son on her chest, his tiny body warm against hers. James stands beside them, his own tears falling freely as he gazes at the miracle they've created together. "He's perfect," James murmurs, his voice trembling with awe. He reaches out hesitantly, brushing a finger against the baby's soft cheek. "Just like you." Sarah smiles weakly, exhaustion heavy in her eyes but love radiating from every pore. "We did it," she says softly, looking up at him. "You and me. Together." James nods, choking back emotion. "Yeah, and we'll keep doing it, one day at a time." Later that night, as Sarah rests and nurses their son, James sits by her bedside, watching them both with a mixture of wonder and gratitude. He thinks about how far they've come, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the countless moments when he wasn't sure they'd make it, and realizes that this moment, right here, is worth every ounce of pain. "I meant what I said earlier," he begins quietly, breaking the silence. "About not giving up, about fighting for us, because seeing you hold our son, it makes everything clear. You're my family, Sarah, my home, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Sarah looks at him, her expression softening. "I believe you," she says simply, her voice carrying a weight of forgiveness and hope. "But remember, James, it's not just about big gestures or promises. It's about showing up every single day. That's what matters most." "I know," he replies, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "And I will, for you, for him, for us." Weeks later, surrounded by loved ones at a small, intimate ceremony held in their backyard, James and Sarah renew their wedding vows. The air is crisp, the sky painted in hues of pink and orange as the sun sets behind them. Friends and family gather around, including Sarah's parents and James's siblings, all smiling warmly as they witness the couple take this symbolic step forward. Standing beneath a simple arch adorned with twinkling fairy lights, James holds Sarah's hands in his voice steady but full of emotion. "When I married you, I promised to love and cherish you for better or worse. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what those words truly meant. Today, I vow to never lose sight again. To honor you not just with words, but with actions. To show up, no matter what life throws our way. Because you are my greatest gift, my anchor, my partner." Tears stream down Sarah's face as she responds, her voice strong despite the quiver of emotion. "When we started this journey, I dreamed of a love that would last a lifetime. And while we've faced challenges neither of us could have imagined, I wouldn't trade this path we've walked, not even for an easier one. Because it brought us here, to a deeper understanding, a stronger bond, and a family built on resilience and faith. I vow to stand by your side, to forgive, to grow, and to love you with everything I have." As they seal their vows with a kiss, the crowd erupts into applause, but for James and Sarah, the world fades away. In that moment, they are reminded of why they fought so hard to find each other again, and why they'll continue fighting to protect what they've